Hi, welcome back to Building a Referral Machine. This is session 2. We're going to begin reactivating your existing network, and we're starting today with making contact. So as you start to reactivate your network and you start to do the referral machine, and you start to build your referral machine, there's a number of things that I think it's important that we tell you to expect. So first of all, people are going to start to respond to you very differently in these meetings, particularly the one we're going to describe today in this session. They're going to apply a lot of other positive attributes to you, and you'll feel that in many cases there are things that you don't deserve, and I think it's possible it's true, but that's part of the psychology of what this is about. It's really for them to have a completely different opinion of who you are, and that's really the logical lens we would like to give them so that they have a different opinion of us. And many of those positive attributes are going to be very useful in your business. They're going to be overwhelmed in general with your generosity because of your behavior, because really only very generous people behave in a certain way. And we're leveraging that sort of that psychology as well. So people will view you as very connected, and that'll be a very obvious conclusion they'll draw from your behavior. And a very odd thing that happens is that this network that you currently have, that you've been cultivating for years, it turns out will be the least productive network you'll ever have in the future. So it may have taken you years and all of that, and it's of great value to you. It'll turn out that by far the most productive people that you will have in your network will be people that you will meet from this point forward. Okay, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that a bit later so you understand the full implications of that. That only 50% of the contacts that you will meet are going to really feel this need to reciprocate. When you do something good for them, they're just going to feel like, God, I just can't sleep at night unless I return the favor. And these are the people that are very, very important to you. But a lot of what we're doing is specifically designed to be able to create that need, but it doesn't happen to everybody. So we refer to it as a reciprocity gene. I think, as we've mentioned, some people are just built that way and some people aren't. And it doesn't really have anything to do with really the value or caliber of their character. It's just one of those attributes, and there's just nothing we're going to change about that. So we're just going to take advantage of that when it does happen, and we really are going to not invest in folks that don't have it. So that's something to expect. Everyone will be grateful, however, even though half the people will really be dying to do something for you. Universally, everybody will be very impressed and very grateful for the things that you do for them or that you wish to do for them. Now, a majority of the introductions you're going to get from people, and this is part of the system, and you want this, are actually going to be vendors, or they're going to be other professionals with their business development hat on. In other words, they may be a consultant that delivers consulting services for half their time, but the other half of the time they have to go out and find their own new clients. So it's when they're in that business development, new client development mode is really the part that you will interact with them on for the most part. And the vast majority of those intros will be that. But that's okay, because you're building an army of eyes and ears out there that are awake and active for you, that are out looking for opportunities. Again, so that percentage of your network that knows about something, you want to make sure that you hear about it, and you want that percentage to be a large number. Therefore, you need to have your network to be a large number. Now, doing this, it's fun. It's very fast in the way that it grows, and it'll grow 4 or 5 times your current size network. To do that in a year's time is probably typical. That's assuming that you don't do this full time. So that's how powerful it really is, and you'll see that as we get into it. The small percentage of them will be targets, and they will target your target profile, meaning the actual decision maker that you like to call on. It's a small percentage. But keep that in mind. That's the big network, a lot more active eyes and ears out there. That small percentage could be a large number, and that's really what we're looking for. You'll also notice that in your business development strategy that there's a direct relationship between referral machine introductions and you receiving introductions and leads. Now, over time, your behavior changes as your network gets very large, and you just maintain it. In other words, if your network is 10 times larger than it currently is, at that point, you're probably not going to grow it much bigger. You may turn over, some new people as people start to fade or move on, but you'll maintain it for the most part. And it doesn't take much effort to do that. And then you'll just reap the rewards of a lot of introductions that come from that large network that you just maintain. You don't really grow it. And that's where this becomes now an investment, in the sense that once you build it and you have a low maintenance cost to be able to keep it going, it continues Unlike cold calling, for example, you stop cold calling, you stop getting appointments for the most part. And so this is a very different kind of investment. You're building a machine that continues to produce leads and sizable number, even though you're not doing much in the future. But in the short term, you will be making lots of introductions and getting referrals, and you'll notice that you may go a month and you make no introductions. And you'll notice if you plot this, which I don't recommend you do, but there's a lot of people that did do it and share it with me, that they would actually see the seesaw in their business, the highs and lows that were directly related to the month before that they were actually making introductions, reminding people that, oh yeah, that's right, I got to do this thing for Bob. You know, and then their eyes and ears are open and really active for that month, and then they come up with 2 or 3 introductions for you that are great. So that's really how this works. I'm just trying to set expectations. That's what you will, the vast majority, if not all of you, will witness, or you'll experience exactly this. So back to the 6 stages of the cycle. Today we're going to focus on making contact. So the rules around making contact, and this is the contact to invite a discussion from somebody who's already in your network, right? So we're reactivating your existing network, try to redefine the relationship you have with a number of folks. Now in a previous session, part of the preparation is that you made a list of people that are for the most part good witnesses for you, productive people in your network, or people that should be productive for you, but we need to revisit them. Okay, so whatever that list is, 100 people, 200 people, we're going to contact them. Now email is best because it's just how people work these days. That email for most people is a to-do list. So as they see emails, they look at them, they flag them, they come back, they go 2 or 3 screens back, they continue to look whenever they have time to sit down, and they may see your email 2 or 3 times and ultimately get back to you. So that's always the best thing because they're constantly looking at their email as part of their to-do list. So that's what we want to do, is we want to send an email. The email needs to be separate and distinct action in terms of what it's about and what it's asking for. So what I'm saying is that not just even the email, but even a conversation where you may want to invite somebody on the phone that's someone who's close to you. Now you can use the same script that you would use in email, you would just use it in words, and we'll talk about the script in a minute. So you could leave it in voicemail if you like. Email is just, it's something that's in their face a little bit more, so you get a little bit better response. Or you could do both. Leave the voicemail, leave the message saying that I sent you an email, or vice versa. Now, what you want to do is not tie it to another conversation. In other words, I don't want to tack this on the bottom of an email dialogue I'm currently having. I don't want to have a phone conversation and then say, oh, and by the way, I've got this other thing I want to tell you. That's what we're trying to avoid. So even if you think that, I would hang up, pick up the phone, call them back again, even if it's a minute later. But you need to make it, there's psychology in this that I don't want to spend much time on at this moment, but you do need to make it a separate and distinct event, okay? This invitation. The invitation and all your behaviors are going to be for their benefit only. So you're not going to say things like, so that we can do something for each other, so that we can share something for each other. See, that's 50-50. That's not all in their benefit. You want to make this completely magnanimous. It's all about them. A very important aspect of this. The process also too is not a new thing that you're doing. So many people will say, well, I've got this new process I'm doing, or I'm trying this new thing out, or I'm doing this thing called building a referral machine. See, you never want to do that. The whole point of the behaviors we're going to be giving you is that they attribute an unusual number of characteristics beyond anything that you would have thought. They're going to be attributing these things to you as a person. These are going to be your character attributes. So why would you give it away and say it's part of this other process I'm doing? It takes it all away from you, and that's not what we want. If we want someone to feel that they want to help you because you're so special to them, it can't be that he's so special to me because he does this mechanical process. Well, you're no longer special. It's just the process. So we don't want anything like that. No references to anything like that. This is just what you do, okay? Because it's important. If this is just what you do, it has implications as to what kind of character just does this. Okay, that's so important. Now, next thing is that for each of these people on your list, you're going to have to determine what's the most appropriate level of investment. And what I mean by that is investment in time and energy. So you know these folks are in your network. You know whether a phone conversation, coffee, office meeting at their place, your place, lunch, cocktails, dinner, whatever it might be, you'll know what's appropriate, not only for your investment in them for the future, but it depends on their relationship. Some people you hardly know, some people are close, some people, well, it's been a long time. We usually try to get out once a quarter for dinner after work and or cocktails, and we just haven't done it. So I just need to do that because that's what I normally do with that person. So you just make that determination with each person on the list. You'll find out in the beginning, and what I would actually recommend is that it'll be more meeting than you might want. In other words, more physically meeting them for a cup of coffee or lunch or something. What'll happen over time, because if you start doing this thing, you get buried pretty quickly. So what you want to do is that you want to become more efficient. And we have a whole section just on efficiency at the end. But what you're going to want to do is ultimately graduate to where a lot of introductions you get are going to be handled on the phone. Now that seems a little contrary for a lot of you, but you'll see as we get into this thing how elegantly you can do that and how in many ways it's even a more positive thing. The problem is you have to get better at it, and it's going to take a number of these in-person meetings, maybe 20 or 30, before you're going to be able to get the job done that we're going to show you needs to get done, to get it done over the phone, and to get it done over 30 minutes on the phone. It's going to be tough, especially if it's a stranger that somebody introduces you to. But in many ways, you'll see what an actual bonus that is to be able to do it on the phone, not just for your own efficiency, but the impact it has on the other person. You know, very counterintuitive, but you'll see. Also, from a start, we talked about earlier how you should set up a strategy for how you're going to do your referral machine. Well, I would think in terms of thinking about how you handle your calendar, and we'll talk more about it during the efficiency discussion, but think about setting up blocks of time in your calendar that I always reserve, unless obviously if there's some extenuating circumstances you're flexible, but you generally want to try to do something like, Monday afternoons and Friday mornings. Those are relatively dead times for me to meet with prospects and clients, so this would be perfect for me doing referral machine kind of activity. And there's a lot of activity you'll do after business hours where you're not meeting anybody. It's much easier, much more productive than things like going to a networking event or something like that in the evening. So we'll talk more about that. Consider as a guideline that whatever plan you put together, thinking in terms of a minimum of 5 and as much as 25 conversations, either coffee, phone, lunch, a week, okay? A minimum of 5, otherwise it just takes too long to get this thing off the ground. There are people that in the beginning will take it to an extreme, which if you can do it, I'm all for it. I had a gentleman that not that long ago talked about how he did 160. His list was 160 people that he thought should be meeting the witness criteria, and although they haven't been productive, have a high probability of being much more productive in the future. So he basically took a month off from his normal business, where the vast majority of his time was dedicated to referral machine, and he got all 160 invitations out in the first week and a half, and then he started getting all these appointments with all these folks in the subsequent couple of weeks, and it just filled his calendar for actually several months going forward. So that's something that you can consider as well, and I would recommend that. But seriously, 5 to 25 a week is really what you need to be thinking about initially, at the very least. So you're going to make contact, which was the first step in the wheel, and that contact is going to invite the discussion. So the contact is going to be simply this, I'm telling you, likely email. It's going to be, "Hi Bob, hope all's well with you. As you probably know, as a byproduct of building my business over the years, I've developed a pretty significant business network. Recently, I've been introducing my connections to each other where it makes sense, and everyone's found it very useful in supporting their business efforts." All right, so that's the primary message. The second one is the invitation. Of course, I generally know what you do, because they're in your network in this particular case. In the future, they'll be meeting people that you don't know. But of course, I generally know what you do. But I'm not so sure I know it well enough to know a good connection for you when I see one. So if you'd like to be able to have a conversation like that, I'd love to do it, because I'd love to learn more about that level of detail of what you do. That's it. No more stuff. Not a lot of other stuff, okay? Just don't want to add a lot of stuff. The more you add, the more you dilute the primary message. And this is the message. Now, it turns out people respond extremely well to this. Now, you notice there isn't in there, maybe we should meet and I think we can do more networking together, or we can help each other more. see, they help each other more. That means that this person, you're expecting this person to do some stuff for you too. And it's not a big difference, but there's a lot of little things that we're doing throughout this whole process that are based in psychology, that compounding cumulatively, they have a big effect. So all these little things matter when you're talking about the entire system. So we don't want to do that. You'll get a lesser return, by the way, on the, see if we can just discuss whether we can help each other out a little bit better. A significantly less response rate. So you'll get the vast majority of people responding back. In some cases where they're very important to you, they don't respond back, and it's a little bit odd. Well, it's because they're just so busy. They saw your email come through. They were thinking, oh God, I'll wait till I get to my calendar and I can come up with a bunch of dates. I'd love to be able to do it, but I'm going to wait till I get back to some time when I can sit at my calendar. And then what happens is they're so busy, 3 or 4 screen loads go by of emails, and then they just forgot. So some of those people, you could tap them again and say, I sent you an email about whether we should get together. Didn't get a response. I know you're real busy, but before I assume that you don't want to get together, I thought I'd just check in with you one more time. And you'll find that I have somebody that was a company that statistically over a bunch of people actually tracked that one element of what happens when you ask a second time. And it turned out that it was 75%, some odd number around there, 75% of the time, the person said, oh God, that's right, that was a great email, thanks for the invite, I've just been so buried lately. And sure enough, it took place. By the way, they did a third one and found out they got almost no response on the third one. No incremental response, right? Where 75% of the people that didn't respond responded well to the second email. Third email, virtually nothing. So we'll take advantage of that insight, and I'll pass it on to you. So the next thing is that we have to have the meeting, and in this meeting, we're titling the meeting as a meeting to identify the introductions that you can make to them. That's really the objective of the meeting, but this is really referred to as the first call that you're making with them. So the first thing was the invitation, now is the actual first meeting. Like I said, could be on the phone. Over time in the future, more of them, a greater percentage, will be on the phone, you'll see. So the first thing we want to keep in mind is a number of critical rules before we get into the scripts. So we want to make sure that we're making it all about them. It's all for their benefit only. Continuing, not just the invitation, but even continuing in this meeting. Now, those of you who are taking the Trust and Influence program, you'll understand all the psychology and all the benefits that accrue to making it all about them. Your demeanor, friendly, casual, and encouraging in general. Just, you're a good guy, good girl, good meeting, okay? And it's going to be all about them, so what's not to be excited about on their part? You're clearly there to help them. Once again, I want to remind you, even when you're there's going to be no comment about them doing this new thing. Okay, as far as they know, this is the way you've always behaved. They just didn't know it. Okay, you'll get comments, by the way, in the future. A lot of people saying, God, all this time that I've known you, I just can't believe that, you didn't include me in this thing, and I'm so glad you have. So that's good. That's a good sign, right? That means that you did a good job of not making it sound like you're just trying this new thing. In many cases, that's not for their benefit. When you say that, it's just for your benefit because you're feeling like you need an excuse to explain why you're behaving different. And you don't want that. You don't need an excuse to behave differently. The fact is, they just never saw this part of you. They had no reason to see this side of you. That's all it is. And you can just say that, listen, I'm just, I've been really busy. I haven't been able to get around to everybody. And you're just one of those folks that I've been thinking about. And I'm glad we finally got to where we can start doing this together. Now, objective number 1 in the call. In this meeting, we need to apply and transfer that whole trigger circumstances and witness logic, that triggering and witness logic. We have to get that in their head. We got to get them to stop thinking, which is generally their default position, is to stop thinking about how I don't want to meet other business development folks. I just need to meet prospects. Okay, we got to stop that line of thinking. It's very limited thinking on their part. And they'll easily see that when you're talking to them. They'll realize, and it's another aha moment for them that they'll be grateful for. Objective number 2 is that you have to get some information or enough information to be able to actually do that 5% thing. So we have to take action on their behalf. So we have to do a 5% behavior. It doesn't have to be in that meeting. And in fact, it's most likely going to be after. But in many cases, you can set that up even in the meeting, talk about names. Some cases, especially in the beginning, you're going to feel like, okay, well, I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board, look at my contact list, and see if I can, who would be a good contact for them. But that's fine in the beginning. That works just fine. You won't lose anything. But you understand the whole purpose of the call is to position you to do that, okay? Now, the introductions we make people are to other people. So they're introductions to people, places, or things. So you'll notice that there's a place in your, later in your network when you're just maintaining it, for example, or when you're talking about prospects that you have and you're in between two meetings with a prospect and they're going a little bit dark. You'll notice that one of the things you can do, and this is how we use the referral machine in the Trust and Influence sales program, is that you're going to send them something. You're going to make an introduction of a person, could be a peer, could be another resource to them, place or thing. And the place or thing, for example, I had recently a client who shares custody with with his ex-wife with a teenage daughter. And he was looking for something special he could do, knowing that he was going to have this 2 weeks with his daughter coming up in the second half of the year. What could he do that was special? And I told him about taking a cruise, and he hadn't thought about a cruise. So this is a thing, right? So I told him about what he ought to consider as a cruise because of all the things it has for him being single as an adult or older adult, and all the things for her being single as a teenager, and then all the things you can do together. And it's a confined space, so it's safe and you're never that far apart. And he just thought it was genius. He goes and does this, comes back from the cruise saying it was the best thing that he could have ever done. So he's very grateful to me. I introduced him to a particular thing, a concept that he wasn't thinking about. So that's adding value in his life. Now, the places could be website addresses. You could be sending other things like, here is an article that I read that might help you with that big initiative you're working on, or another individual that I know that's working on the same kind of initiative. So there's another person introduction. But in the beginning, what you really want to do when you're building your network and you're trying to make a big impact on folks is you want it to be a person. Now, the other reason you want to be a person is because we want to demonstrate the currency, I guess. We want to demonstrate this is what we want from them. It turns out when people who have the reciprocity gene, like I'm saying, maybe half people, so half the people think that way, then what they tend to do with reciprocity is first thing that comes to mind is to do the same thing back to you that you did for them. It's when they can't do that, then they start thinking of alternatives. So what we want is we want that first thing that comes to mind that they want to do to be something that we want, the most value to us. And it is the introduction to another person to build our network of eyes and ears. So that's one of the reasons why we're making sure that we get to this. So objective one is to apply and transfer this whole logic to this new person. And then the second thing is to make sure that we've set it up such that we will be able to, 100% probability, introduce them to somebody. Now, a lot of you are thinking, my biggest fear here is that I don't have people in my network that I can introduce people to. And now that's a natural feeling that you should have. In fact, most people do, not everybody, but most people actually think that at this stage. Now, it's again like learning a new language. When you see this through a different mindset, and people have told me that after 4 or 5 cycles of this, an introduction where you now have to go, or a meeting where you have to now make an introduction, after 4 or 5 of those, which isn't very many, you will start to see your contacts database completely different. All of a sudden you'll see that there's 90% of them are witnesses for the people you want to talk to. So don't worry, this will get much easier very quickly. Now, if possible, and we'll struggle with this a little bit in the beginning, but maybe not, that while you're actually in this first meeting, that when you get toward the end, you may even be able to throw out a few names, because we'll get them to realize that a certain job description is a great witness for them. And then at that point, you're going to say, yeah, well, so if you want to meet more of those, do you know so-and-so? Do you know so-and-so? And depending on how large your community is or how close your networks are, they might say, yeah, well, I know George. And say, well, do you know Bob? Do you know Sarah? Well, actually, I don't. And they're also witnesses of the same caliber. You'll say, well, if you want, I could introduce you. And if you've given them the right logic, they will say, oh, would you do that? That's great. That would be great. Okay, now we can't assume that that's who they want to meet, though, until they get the right logic in their head. Then they'll realize the value of that, and you'll see how that plays out. So we can choose to do that right in the meeting. And in fact, over time, after the first 5 or 10 of these discussions, that's precisely what you'll be doing. Because all of these witnesses to you, for people that are witnesses for you, they'll just be circling in your mind, at the forefront of your mind at each one of these meetings, and you'll be able to throw out all kinds of names. And you'll see, once you get in the right mindset, it's not a problem. Now you will describe then how you make the introduction, let him know it's going to be an email, it's going to have both names on it, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But you're going to describe that to him, and you'll find out that if you can make it all about them, it's just amazing how much they'll let the meeting be all about them. Because it's by far our favorite topic, right? So remember, I talk about the human condition and as being this: enough about me, how about you? What do you think of me? That's pretty much how we're built. So it turns out that the most interesting thing about us, or about our world, is us. So if you want to talk about me the whole time, that's great. And these are folks that don't even realize what's happening here. But the implications to who you are and what that says about you are pretty profound. Something we won't spend time on in this session or in this program. So you'll find out that you may get down to the last 5 minutes of 30 minutes before they start to say, oh, well, God, this has been all about me. God, there must be something I can do for you. First indicator that they may have the reciprocity gene is when they're saying, God, this is great that you'll do this for me, but God, what can I do for you? Now, a lot of people will say that, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's the reciprocity gene talking. It could just be that, mama raised a good kid, and they know that's polite to be able to do that. So it could be driven by that. So we don't really know for sure, because really the reciprocity we're looking for is not the intention, it's the action. Because the action is where you derive your benefit. So we are going to be that unusual 5%er who's actually going to take action, and then we're going to see if they respond with action. That demonstrates they have the gene. So keep in mind that when they do ask, and you may only be in the last 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, don't worry about it, because really all you really care is about 15 seconds, right? So you'll easily get your 30-second commercial in and say, this is what I'm looking for, and 5 minutes is plenty, because all you're really looking for initially is for them, in the hopes that it's possible, right? It's possible. We have to give them this option that you can say, if you run into anybody with this description, that you hear them saying this, thinking this, wishing they had that, frustrated with that, concerned about this, afraid of that, right? You throw those out there. It's amazing how many people will say, God, I was just with a client last week. That's what they were saying. So we need that opportunity of getting a prospect just like that, right? Again, fastest path to revenue. Because we're throwing it out there in words that they could hear, they would say, I have clients that tell me that all the time. That's great news, guys. But that shows you the power of this kind of 30-second commercial. So the only reason you need 5 minutes is in case they say that I have that, in which case then you need to set up that introduction. So these are the rules. I can show you the script. It isn't so much a script in the sense that like the invitation is, where it's all one directional. This is a conversation, it's all about them. But these are some of the critical questions that you'll be asking. And I know this might be hard to read, so I'll read some of these out. Please give me an update on what's going on with your business. So it can be, hi Bob, it's been a while. I know some things have changed. I know you're still at the same company, you're still doing the same thing, but why don't you give me an update on what's going on? There's always an update on what's going on. So they'll give you that, get them talking. So at some point, they can say whatever they want to say about what's going on, but at some point, you are going to say, how would you describe your ideal client or customer prospect profile? So everybody has that, by the way. So they have a good answer to that one. It starts to break down from here. So, okay, now that I understand who that is, and it may be 1 or 2 different market segments, you'll say, well, what's usually going on in their world that triggers their need for your products or services? And you'll be surprised how many will say, seasoned, successful professionals, how many will say, God, that's a good question, let me think. And you're going to help them think that through. Now, they'll very quickly see how important the answer to that question really is to them. And they'll be thanking you, by the way, as you get through this logic. They'll be thanking you in the meeting like, God, this has been great. It's really given me a new perspective. See, they all get that this is all good stuff. So they will tell you, and then you can say, is there anything else? You want multiple triggers. Don't assume it's a trigger. So you're going to have to dig a little bit deeper because they don't have this on the tip of their tongue. So they're going to have to think this through. So it's not pulling teeth, but it's, you will have to help them think it through. So you're going to say anybody else, or anything else, what else could be going on multiple times in order to really get it out. In some cases, they might give you the reason, like in the real estate residential realtor example, that the reason is that they got promoted or they're getting transferred. Right? No, I'm sorry, that they got to change address or they got to get a bigger house. See, that's the reason. That's not the triggering circumstance. Triggering circumstance is one that makes that reason real in their life. So it's the promotion. That's why they need a bigger house. It's they got a job transfer, which is why they got to move. Okay, so you're gonna have to help them think that through a little bit, which is why it was so important for you to have done the exercise for yourself, because you'll see that you'll struggle with that a little bit, but you've got to get through that knot hole, because very quickly you're going to be helping other people get through that. Now you're going to ask them, now that I understand that, that's very interesting. Now, so what individuals or other job descriptions or roles are inherently made aware of that? They may not care, but just because of what they do, they're aware of it. And the person will think, God, that's a good question. That's a very interesting idea. And then you'll get this idea. Now, I never use the word witness with a networking partner. So I think those people that are not part of a program like this that you meet, and if they've met with me, they're part of my network, they probably don't know the term witness. I don't know why. I don't know that it's a bad thing, but what it does is I think it moves the conversation a little bit more toward this idea that I'm doing a process, as opposed to this just me. So you want this just to be that I'm just genuinely interested in that, which you are, actually. So what would be the people that are aware of that? And then once again, you're going to go through multiple iterations. Well, is there anybody else? Is there anybody else? Multiple times to get to multiple. And remember, it's a job description, so it makes it a little bit easier to put a label on. Then you can ask them questions like, if it's a business development person, so how do you find your prospects? Who are your best sources of referrals? Who are your best alliance partners? Are you involved in any associations or organizations? And by the way, that's interesting for you to know, just if nothing else, if you can use, and it's a powerful tool if you can do that for your business, is if you have any presentations that you can do, any public speaking. Some people are uncomfortable with it. Some people have a difficult time coming up with a message. But if you've got a good message that isn't just selling you, but is somewhat educational, you'll want to be able to ask almost everybody you meet, if they're involved with associations or organizations. You'll be shocked at how many people really are, particularly business development people. You'll be also surprised at how many are on boards of associations like this. People that are in a position of influence, being able to get you to have a speaking engagement to promote yourself. So the next set here, there's a little bit of a gap here. These are when you're talking to somebody who isn't a business development type person, but maybe a target person. Say you call on CIOs or CFOs. That some CFOs that are not clients, and you may have some that are, but this is not a prospect. It's more of a networking kind of a thing, even though that's not a primary motivator for people in those kind of roles. But if you do know them and you are networking to some degree, you can ask them this. You want to start not going after who their client is, because they're not that responsible or involved in getting clients and getting new customers. So we want to talk about something slightly different that is more relevant in their world. And it's asking them, what are the key initiatives you're working on? So if it were CFO, CIO, refer to those as inward-facing people, by the way. We'll talk more about that in subsequent sessions. That this is what drives their thinking. This is what's relevant and most important in their life. It's the key initiatives they're working on. Now, they might be interested in a connection with somebody that might be a peer of theirs, same job description, in a different kind of company, different industry, or even the same industry, but primarily other industries that maybe are going through the same thing. The CIO is going through a major conversion of some sort. The CFO is going through a major conversion in their finance system, or they wish they had better reporting, and somebody that works for a software company that has a bolt-on reporting utility that adds on to SAP or something like that. So you want to know what these initiatives are. That way you can understand whether or not there's a person, place, or thing that you can introduce them to that's relevant to them, because meeting other people from a networking perspective is not that interesting to them. Okay? So being able to send them to another resource, but another person, place, or thing. Somebody who shares some of the same issues. Looking for any special resources that can help you with that, right? This is the resource question. What's the one thing that you do that really makes a difference to others? So you can really understand what is it that's primary in their life, see if there's any contribution you can make to that. So a very simple conversation. The key thing is this: who's your client profile? What's going on in their life that triggers a need for you? And then who would be people? Now, what you're not going to ask them is, none of the questions up here say, so tell me, I want to help you out. What's a good introduction for you? People do that all the time. The problem is that they've got flawed thinking that answers that question. So what if they say, yeah, whatever you do, don't send me any salespeople, just send me somebody who's a prospect. So anybody who says they want this particular client, this product or service, yeah, when you find one of those, just send somebody to me. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Now, interestingly enough, the most seasoned People with the biggest networks, some of the most successful people, have that attitude because they're not in the growing their network mode anymore. Their networks are huge. They already know everybody they need to know, they think. But they're thinking now only in terms of, don't give me any more. But on the other hand, when you can start talking to them about this logic, it's amazing how many of them say, that's a good point. Then they start thinking, God, most of the people in my network actually don't meet that criteria. Now they start to realize, I do need more people that are like that. You can even say to them, one of the problems that I run into with folks is that they have this 95-5 problem. And almost everybody will say, oh yeah, tell me about it, me too. So this will get people off this idea that you don't need to meet people that are an extension of your eyes and ears in the marketplace. Most everybody will say this is it was a very, very helpful conversation. It's been a great reminder for me, a great aha moment for me. You'll get that all the time. That's the worst case response that you'll get. So that's the conversation. So in the summary of today, which was just about making that initial invitation, that contact, and then actually making the real physical contact where you're actually starting the referral machine with them. That is in session 2 here, inviting a new conversation, making it all about them. Use your 30-second commercial, which again, if you only have 5 minutes out of 30, that's fine. You're not trying this new thing. I can't tell you that enough. Again, you're going to feel a great need to justify why you're doing something different in the eyes of the other person. Don't worry about it, okay? They never knew that you weren't doing it all the time. They just knew that they weren't involved in it. So that you must transfer this trigger and witness logic, because that will get them to buy into meeting another business development person, and tons of them. So if you think about a guy who is just is a business consultant or an executive coach, do you have any connections for this person? Well, who do they call on? Well, they call on executives and business owners. So the question to you is that, well, do you know anybody that calls on executives or business owners? And I'm asking you, do you? Do you have anybody that calls on those folks? Do you know anybody whose entire job is to only work with executives or business owners? I don't care if you have 20 people in your network, you have an answer to that, which is yes. You actually do know somebody. So when you start getting into the witness logic and you start thinking that through, you'll see that you have a lot of contacts for people. Okay, when we get into the introductions, you'll see that you'll have a number of them that you can make to everybody you meet. Now, after a period of a month, it'll be crazy. You'll have so many people that you can introduce somebody to in just a month's time, and you'll see how that works. Because see, our objective here, right, for this whole making contact is making sure it's at least 100% probability that we're going to be able to do that 5% behavior. Because this meeting, in conjunction with that, is the magic that starts the machine. And like I said, just give it a few iterations because it is a new mindset. Nothing compared to the Trust and Influence program, but it does take a little bit of a mindset change. Okay? Now, practice preparation for this session. As with almost all of these, I want to make sure you take everything we talk about and you got to make it your own. You got to take these concepts and you've got to apply it directly to your industry, your kind of client base, your marketplace, right? The contacts that you make at a prospect. You've got to adapt it all to that to make it worthwhile for you. Prepare your plan for inviting all those folks. You put together a list, right? Go back and rethink the list. Make sure that they're the witnesses that you want to reactivate. Get prepared for that. Understand how many there are, how many a week can you do, and think about how you might want to set aside a month where 25% of the time is going to be doing this just to get it kicked off. So the faster you get this kicked off in earnest, the sooner that you build a network that is your fastest path to revenue on any given day. So pre-prepare this list, as I mentioned, and start thinking in terms of what do you know or have to offer when you think about all these folks on witnesses, and think about even your client contacts. Think about, well, what are the things that are on their mind? All right, witnesses, easy, they're networking, but what are things that you have that for your type of client prospect? Say it's the chief financial officer. So what things do you already have in your arsenal of interesting things? Do you have websites or you have articles? An unusual website? Do you have, and this is on the professional side because there's always the personal side as well, and I use the example of the cruise to show you that we're talking about personal contributions of value to someone's life. It doesn't have to be just business. But when they want to reciprocate and they asked you, What is that going to do for you? Well, of course, you want to make yours, most likely, you're going to want to make it in your business life. But you don't have to do that all the time for them. It can also be personal. So think about what articles that you have, what knowledge that you have, special resources you have access to that people that are witnesses of yours or your client profile could really use. Think about what you have there as your starting arsenal, I guess, a portfolio of things that you can invite people to. We've been talking about people, but always remember there's still the option of places and things. A place is like a website, for example, or a place that he and his spouse can go to for dinner, or a place that they can go to for a person they can go to, or a place they can go to learn something. One of my clients not that long ago, she knew a French pastry chef trained in the United States. It's in her neighborhood, but she was trained in Paris. She was French. She was a pastry chef. She's retired, but she was a well-known one. But she has a family. She stays at home. But what she likes to do to stay, it's a big part of her life, just to stay involved in it to some degree. She'll do things. She'll do things on a custom basis. So if you happen to know somebody that's got a big 50th anniversary coming up, wedding for their daughter, bar mitzvah, whatever it may be, some major event, that maybe a nice touch would be having a French pastry chef put together some custom elements. Then she could introduce her. But she kept saying, God, I've this is a wonderful person. I've always wished that I could send her some business, but it's been several years. I can't, I just never run into anybody. Well, it's because nobody's going to ever ask her for a trained pastry chef that works out of their home that for a good value would do something for me. She's just not going to get that question is the problem. It's possible, not probable. On the other hand, she started thinking in terms of triggering circumstances and witnesses, and she started to find out that in just two months, she was told by the pastry chef that please, no more, I've got too many opportunities that you've given me so far. It turned out that when she started to listen for those things, again, what would someone be saying? Well, people were saying all the time things like, well, my 50th anniversary is coming up, I'm planning my daughter's wedding. Just these little off-the-cuff phrases that really just blow right by you because they aren't germane to the main conversation. They're just, oh, that's nice, right? We're not really listening. Understand, that's true for everybody else as well, right? So what we're doing there is that she activated a lens for herself because she decided that I really want to send this person some business. Now I understand the psychology of this. So she planted the seed in her own head and said, if I ever hear anybody say anything about big, major fun, elegant events that they're planning, I'm going to think pastry chef. And sure enough, she goes about her normal business, talking to her clients. She was shocked, she said, of how much her client base, which are basically other executives, she couldn't believe how many people were engaged in some point of the year, within the next year going forward, would drop a statement talking about some major celebration. And so it turned out almost every week she was able to send an opportunity. And many of those turned into actual business to the extent that it was more than what her friend, who she couldn't do anything for years, in a matter of 2 months, couldn't take any more business. So that's important for you to consider. What kind of resources like that do you have that you might be able to keep in mind? So as you start talking to people in these initial meetings, you may find you can make a contribution of value to their life in lots of different dimensions already. Okay, so always practice 30-second commercials. My guess is you're probably still not as comfortable as you need to be. And practice this whole idea of transferring this in almost every networking conversation you're having at all. Just try to transfer that. Practice that. That's the key thing that we're trying to do here. Okay, so that's all I have for now. I will see you on the next session. So hope you got a lot out of this, and do some of this preparation, and I will see you on the other side in session 3. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye.